Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at some interesting material, specifically some excerpts from a sports article digging into a young star's playoff performance.
Right. We're talking Anthony Edwards.
Exactly. Minnesota Timberwolves guard Anthony Edwards, and how he fared against the Oklahoma City Thunder in that recent playoff series. Our goal here is to really unpack the analysis in this article.
Yeah, see what it says about his game, his development, and maybe why these kinds of tough matchups are actually, important for players on the rise.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How one series, even one where the basic stats look okay on the surface, can really put a player under the microscope.
Totally. It highlights those areas needing growth.
Because you look at the numbers for that five-game series against OKC, Edwards averaged 23 points, shot 47%. I mean, if you just saw that.
You wouldn't necessarily think struggle.
Right. Not immediately, no. But this article we're looking at, it makes a pretty bold claim right off the bat. It says Anthony Edwards got exposed by the Thunder.
And it's important to understand what they mean by exposed. The article isn't saying he's, not a good player. It actually calls him an impressive raw talent, quoting analysts.
Okay.
But it also stresses he's far from a polished product. The exposure wasn't about his talent level. It was about the specifics, the details of his game when facing a really, really good defense. An elite defense, actually.
OKC's defense was top-ranked, yeah. So the article gets specific about how he was exposed. It's not just a general feeling.
Oh, yeah, very specific. It breaks down several key things. For example, it quotes ESPN's Doris Burke.
Okay. What did she say?
She pointed to something pretty fundamental, saying he needs to develop footwork in the post this summer.
Ah, so a concrete skill to work on. That suggests maybe opponents found a weakness there.
It suggests they could limit him in that area, yeah. Or that he didn't have that option reliably in his bag when other things were taken away. Post-game is one thing.
What else did the article highlight? How else did OKC manage to slow him down, according to this source?
Well, the analysis suggests his overall offensive approach was, and this is a word they use, too predictable.
Predictable, okay.
Think about it if the defense basically knows what you're trying to do.
It makes you much easier to guard.
Exactly. The article says it made him an easy cover for OKC's top-ranked defense. If you're predictable, that elite defense can just anticipate, they can scheme, they can cut off your angles before you even get going.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Does the source back that up with any hard data, numbers?
It does, and this was really interesting detail, I thought. It cites second spectrum tracking data.
The player tracking stuff.
Yeah. And it showed he only attempted 32% of his shots within 10 feet of the basket in that series.
32%. Wow, that seems low for a guy known for getting downhill.
It does seem low, and the article interprets that number. It shows he couldn't handle the physicality of OKC's swarming defense.
So maybe they were bumping him off his spots, keeping him out of the lane effectively.
Yeah, that's the implication. They were crowding him, taking away those driving lanes, making it tough for him to get to where he really wants to operate, close to the rim, and sort of compounding that issue. The piece also notes a lack of a mid-range game. So if the paint is packed, he didn't really have that reliable pull-up jumper from, say, 15 feet to counter with.
Okay, so let's piece this together from the article's perspective. He's predictable. He's having trouble finishing through contact near the rim, and he doesn't have that mid-range counter. So where did his shots end up coming from?
Well, that leads right into another major critique in the source, his shot selection. It points out he shot, 16 of 42 on pull-up jumpers.
16 for 42. That's not great efficiency. What's the percentage?
Works out to only 29% from three on those specific pull-ups. In the article's interpretation, he routinely settled for contested shots instead of hunting for better looks.
Settling, yeah. That suggests maybe decision-making under pressure wasn't always optimal.
Or maybe impatience, taking the first available shot even if it's tough, rather than working for something better.
Does the article touch on impatience?
Explicitly, yeah. It connects those dots. It mentions that through the first 4 games, he took a whopping 24 shots early into the shot clock.
24 shots early, like real early.
Yeah, and the article calls this the sign of an impatient player. Just, forcing the issue instead of maybe probing the defense, letting the play develop, finding a softer spot in the coverage.
Okay, so that paints a fairly detailed picture, according to this source. Predictability, struggling near the rim against that D, no reliable mid-range, settling for contested jumpers, and maybe some impatience leading to rush shots.
Right. But what makes the analysis in this source pretty compelling is that it doesn't just critique Edwards in isolation. It provides a direct comparison
From the same series.
from the same series. It contrasts him with OKC star Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
SGA. Okay, how did their approaches differ, according to the article?
It highlights SGA's patience and method. The source notes SGA attempted only 15% of his shots within the first 9 seconds of the shot clock.
Only 15%.
Wow.
Compared to Edwards' 24 total early shots in just 4 games. That's a big difference in frequency.
A huge difference. And the article suggests this lower rate for SGA showed he was composed and rarely settled. It uses him as an example of a star controlling the tempo, being methodical, getting to his spots deliberately, even against tough defense.
So it's really using SGA to underscore the points about Edwards' pace and shot selection in that matchup. Different ways to attack.
Exactly. A different approach to generating offense when the defense is locked in.
So the source lays out these challenges, these areas where OKC really tested Edwards' game. How did Edwards himself respond? Does the article mention his reaction?
It does, and it includes a pretty powerful quote from him after the series ended.
What did he say?
He said, and I'm quoting here, "I'm going to work my butt off this summer. Nobody's going to work harder than me this summer."
Okay, that's direct, strong words. How does the article frame that? Just athlete talk or something more?
The source calls them encouraging words, and, interestingly, frames it as possibly an admission that he needs to refine his craft.
Like acknowledging the issues without maybe spelling them out.
Sort of. It connects that quote directly back to what the analysts were saying that he needs to add to his offensive toolkit. Address the predictability, develop that mid-range, work on the post footwork, the things the article highlighted.
So if he wants to beat these elite defenses consistently in the future, he needs more tools. And his quote suggests he gets it, perhaps.
That's the implication in the source, that maybe this tough series, this exposure, was actually productive in a way. It showed him exactly what he needs to work on. Acknowledging the challenge is step one, right?
It sounds like the article is positioning this not just as a failure or a setback, but maybe as a necessary step, a potential turning point, kind of like what other great players went through.
Precisely. The source explicitly makes those historical connections to provide context. It brings up LeBron James.
LeBron. How so?
It mentions how LeBron was similarly exposed against the Spurs in the 2007 NBA Finals. Remember that? When Popovich basically dared him to shoot by packing the paint.
Oh yeah, the build-a-wall strategy. They knew his jumper wasn't consistent back then.
Exactly. It forced him to go back and relentlessly develop that part of his game. It was a catalyst for his growth into the scorer he became.
Makes sense. And the article mentioned another name too, didn't it? Giannis.
Yes, Giannis Antetokounmpo. The source points out he underwent similar trials, specifically mentioning the losses to the Raptors in 2019 and the Heat in 2020.
Right, where teams built defensive schemes specifically designed to stop his drives. The Giannis wall.
Correct. And those experiences, those playoff defeats where his primary weapon was neutralized, they forced him to adapt. To add counters like that fadeaway jumper, to improve his passing out of double teams. Those struggles came right before he won the title in 2021. They were necessary steps.
So the article is basically suggesting that this OKC beatdown, as they put it, might actually be the wake-up call Edwards needed, just like those challenges were for LeBron and Giannis.
That's the core idea from that part of the source, yeah. Sometimes getting thoroughly outplayed by a great opponent, having your weaknesses laid bare, it's the clearest, most painful, but maybe the most effective way to understand exactly what you need to add to your game to get to that next level.
It's a tough lesson, but maybe a vital one for young superstars.
It often seems to be part of the journey.
Okay, so let's pull back a bit from the pure basketball X's and O's. Thinking about this deep dive into Edwards versus OKC, based on this article. What are the broader takeaways here? Why should you, listening, care about this specific analysis?
Well, I think it offers some really valuable insights that go beyond just sports. It really shows how even extremely talented people at the absolute top of their profession, they still face challenges. They hit walls where their current skills just aren't enough for that specific problem.
Yeah, it highlights that limitations get exposed eventually, right? No one starts perfect.
Exactly. And progress isn't about avoiding those exposures. It's about the response. What happens when your current approach gets tested and found wanting?
It definitely underscores that learning and adapting is a continuous thing. You don't just, make it and you're done. There's always another layer, another counter, another skill to refine, especially at the highest levels.
For sure. And maybe the biggest takeaway is about acknowledging those weaknesses and then actually putting in the work. Edwards' quote about working his butt off, seeing that alongside the stories of how LeBron and Giannis use similar tough playoff losses as fuel,
Yeah.
it just powerfully illustrates that principle. You have to face the uncomfortable truths about your game or your work or whatever it is, and then commit to the hard yards needed to improve. It seems like that's the path the greats take.
So, to recap our journey through this source material, we've unpacked the article's detailed critique of Anthony Edwards' performance against OKC, looking at predictability, shot selection, the lack of certain skills, according to the analysis.
Right. We saw how the source contrasted his approach with SGA's more methodical style in that series.
We noted Edwards' own strong statement about putting in the work this summer.
And we placed this whole episode within that historical context. The article provided how other stars like LeBron and Giannis faced similar defining challenges against elite defenses and used them to grow.
This analysis really did use that series almost like a diagnostic tool, didn't it? Pinpointing the specific areas for improvement.
Yeah, it shows how a great defense doesn't just try to stop you, it actively teaches you what you're missing.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. If facing an elite, well-schemed defense does more than just make scoring difficult, if it actively reveals the specific skills and counters a player needs to add to reach their ceiling, what does that really tell us about the role of great defense? Is it not just about winning that game or series, but also about actively shaping, even accelerating, the development of the next generation of offensive stars by forcing them to evolve?